The snowstorm swallowed the street whole, turning the night into a white, howling void, when a little girl appeared at the edge of the road, walking alone with a pink scarf dragging behind her like a fading signal of hope. Her boots were soaked, her coat far too thin, and her small body leaned forward against the wind as if she had already learned that stopping meant freezing. She kept moving, step by step, whispering the same broken truth to no one and everyone at once, that her mother never came home. From a distance, a single father watched her, his heart tightening as he realized this was not a child playing in the snow, but a child searching for something she was afraid no longer existed. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of human connection, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, Lonely Dad Strong Heart. Your support helps stories like this reach people who need them most. The man who noticed her was already carrying the weight of loss in his bones. He was a single father named Daniel, though the name hardly mattered anymore because most days he felt like a shadow moving through life rather than a person fully living it. His wife had died 3 years earlier, leaving him alone with his young son in a house that still smelled faintly of her shampoo. Since then, Daniel had learned how to survive without warmth, how to move through routines without feeling, and how to lock his heart away so it would not break again. That night, he had stepped outside only to clear snow from his truck after a late shift at the warehouse, expecting nothing more than numb fingers and a quiet drive home. Instead, the storm delivered him a moment that would change everything. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. The wind howled so loudly it drowned out thought, and the snow blurred distance and shape. But the small figure kept coming, uneven and stubborn, like a fragile spark refusing to go out. Daniel's instinct screamed that something was wrong. No child should be out there alone. No child should be walking with that kind of exhaustion carved into her posture. He watched as she stumbled, caught herself, and continued forward as if driven by something stronger than fear. Against his better judgment, against the part of himself that wanted to stay detached and uninvolved, Daniel pulled his coat tighter and stepped away from the safety of his porch. The closer he came, the more details cut into him. Her gloves were mismatched. One sock was slipping down inside her boot. Snow clung to her eyelashes. Her lips were trembling, not just from the cold, but from the effort of holding herself together. Daniel understood that look too well. It was the look of someone who had waited too long for someone who was supposed to return. It was the same look he had seen in his own son the night they explained why his mother would never walk through the door again. Daniel did not speak. He simply walked behind her at a careful distance, not wanting to scare her, but unwilling to leave her alone in the storm. The road ahead vanished into white darkness, and with every step she took, the danger grew. Cars could barely see 10 feet ahead. The cold was ruthless. The storm did not care about innocence. Daniel's boots filled with snow as he followed, his muscles burning, his chest tight with a fear he hadn't felt since the hospital waiting room years ago. The little girl finally slowed near a row of darkened houses, each one silent and sealed, their windows glowing faintly with the warmth of other people's lives. She paused, swaying slightly, and Daniel felt his heart hammer. He knew that pause. It was the moment when the body considers giving up. He moved closer then, close enough to see the red marks on her cheeks and the way her small hands were clenched as if holding onto an invisible thread. He realized with a sudden, painful clarity that she had been walking for a long time. Long enough to be lost. Long enough to be terrified. Long enough for hope to thin into something fragile and dangerous. Daniel made a decision that felt less like a choice and more like a calling. He stepped forward, removing his coat and wrapping it gently around her shoulders, shielding her from the wind. She startled, her eyes wide, but she did not pull away. She looked up at him with the exhausted trust of a child who no longer had the strength to question help. Snow settled into Daniel's hair as he lifted her carefully into his arms, feeling how light she was, how cold. In that moment, he stopped being a man who survived loss and became a man responsible for saving a life. Carrying her back through the storm was one of the hardest things Daniel had ever done. The wind fought him at every step, and the snow stung his face like needles. His arms ached, his lungs burned, but he refused to stop. Each step felt like a promise. Each breath felt like defiance against the night that had taken so much from him already. When he finally reached his house, his hands were shaking as he pushed the door open and stepped into warmth. Inside, the heat wrapped around them like mercy. Daniel set the girl down carefully, wrapping her in blankets and guiding her toward the heater. His son, half asleep on the couch, sat up in confusion, then concern, as he saw the small figure bundled in his father's arms. There were no explanations yet. Only action. Only urgency. Only care. Daniel made warm soup, checked her hands and feet for frostbite, and stayed close, watching her breathing steady as the color slowly returned to her face. It was later, after the storm began to soften its rage, that the truth came together. The girl's mother worked nights and had not returned from her shift. A babysitter had fallen asleep. The child had woken up alone, panicked, convinced something terrible had happened, and had gone out searching into the storm, driven by fear and love in equal measure. Authorities were called. Questions were asked. Relief arrived slowly, mixed with tears and exhaustion. The mother was eventually found safe, stranded at work by blocked roads, frantic with worry. But something had already changed inside Daniel. As the house quieted again and the storm eased into silence, Daniel sat alone at his kitchen table, staring at his hands. He realized that for the first time in years, his heart hurt in a way that felt alive rather than broken. Helping that little girl had cracked something open in him. It reminded him that pain did not disqualify him from compassion. That loss did not mean isolation was the answer. That even someone carrying grief could still be a source of safety for another. Over the following days, Daniel found himself thinking about her often. About how close tragedy had come. About how easily one moment of attention had altered a life's direction. He noticed changes in himself too. He laughed more with his son. He lingered longer at the dinner table. He stopped rushing through life like it was something to endure rather than experience. The storm had forced him to step out of his numbness and into connection. Weeks later, the little girl and her mother visited Daniel's home, not with grand gestures but with quiet gratitude and warm smiles. They brought baked bread and a thank you note written in careful, uneven handwriting. Daniel did not need words. He understood everything in that moment. He understood that sometimes, healing arrives disguised as responsibility. Sometimes, purpose returns not with thunder, but with the soft footsteps of a child in the snow. Life did not magically become easy after that night. Daniel still had bills, exhaustion, and memories that sometimes hurt too much. But now, when the nights felt heavy, he remembered the weight of that child in his arms and the strength he did not know he still had. He remembered that he was capable of protecting, of caring, of stepping forward when it mattered. Near the end of winter, Daniel took his son outside during the first gentle snowfall of the season. They stood together, watching the flakes drift down slowly, peacefully, nothing like the storm that had once howled through their lives. Daniel felt something close to gratitude settle into his chest. Not because life was perfect, but because it was meaningful again. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that even small acts of kindness can change lives, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps keep these stories alive and reaching those who need them. Before the ending, we ask you one special thing. Please comment below what this story made you feel, or who it reminded you of. Your words matter more than you know. Because somewhere, in another storm, someone might need to be reminded that they are not alone, and that a single caring heart can be stronger than the coldest night.